I grew up on a small family farm, and then after high school there, I went to Wartburg College and graduated with a degree in biology there. And then in 2010, I started climbing mountains. I had no idea how to do it and what I was doing. I went to mountain climbing school to learn how to do it and how to use my gear. And once I passed mountain climbing school, that allowed me to start signing up for expeditions globally. And so I started out climbing some easier peaks, and every time I signed up for an expedition, I was always kind of kicking it up a notch, just climbing something a little bit more technical or a little bit taller. And then in 2016, I went over and climbed Everest and became the first woman from Iowa to climb Everest. And then just recently, in December of 28th of 2021, I was in Antarctica and summited the tallest peak in Antarctica. And with that, I successfully completed the 7 summits. And that is when you climb the tallest peak on every continent. I never had a personal trainer or a coach. I was training specifically for climbing expeditions, and I didn't know anybody in Iowa that would know how to coach that. And so I sat down. My background was in running, and I was a cross-country runner and a track runner, so I had some endurance training and coaching there. And then when it came time to start training for climbing expeditions, I did a lot of running still, but I modified. I sat down and created a training program that was centered around the style of movement of climbing. So it was important for me to add weight in a backpack, and so then I was trying to kind of think of ways to mimic that style of movement. And so I would go to the gym with my sandbag in my backpack and get on a Stairmaster and just continually step up and step up and step up. And I was trying to, ideally I would be training in the mountains, but I live in Iowa, so I can't do that here. So, that's as close as I could get to climbing mountains, was just wearing a sandbag in my backpack and getting on the Stairmaster. And then I would do a lot of running, and I would also do weightlifting and sometimes biking and hiking with a pack or sandbag in my pack. And so that's, with every expedition, I would come home and modify my program. It's like, what did I do that worked? What did I do that I could do better next time? And so eventually I kind of fine-tuned my own training program. And so the training, it's pretty brutal. Like, you can't cut corners here. You can't show up kind of half prepared. Like, the mountains are pretty good at calling out people that are not fit enough, and I didn't want to put all that time and energy and effort into something if I was only going to do it halfway. So I designed training programs that were intentionally pretty brutal, and so my life basically revolved around training and nutrition and sleeping and just preparing for every expedition. So I went to a mountain climbing school that was climbing basics, like that's mountain climbing 101. And so that was teaching me the basics. And once I passed that course, that allowed me to start signing up for some basic climbs, some easier climbs, nothing very technical and not insane amounts of extreme altitude. And so I would sign up for easier climbs first, and then, with each expedition, I was kind of kicking it up a notch, maybe a little bit more technical, maybe a little bit taller. And so, that's how you get good. Like, you have to start, somewhere. And so you start with some pretty straightforward climbs and do those and kind of work your way up. And so I did that. And each expedition was kind of a building block and work your way up to something like Everest. And so, yeah, it took a lot of expeditions you do have to be qualified otherwise they won't let you on a team. The acclimatization process, it takes time. You have to be very patient. So like the Everest expedition takes 2 months to do that. And that's why you do these rotations up and down. You have to go up to trigger your body to start adjusting to that altitude. And then you go back down to recuperate. And you do this on every mountain that has extreme altitude, even peaks like Denali. So you do these rotations up and down. And that's how you allow your body to go through this acclimatization process. If you don't do those, you know, everybody's going to get some of your AMS symptoms, which is your acute mountain sickness. And you know, if your body is acclimatizing, those symptoms will typically subside. If your body is not adjusting, your AMS symptoms can progress into things like high-altitude pulmonary edema or high-altitude cerebral edema, and those are very severe and can be fatal. People always ask me about the fear, and that's a good question. You know, I always when I think about fear, like, I think it's healthy to have a certain amount of fear, because, like, if you're completely fearless, that would be concerning to me, because then I would, you know, you might not have a complete awareness of the situation and in the environment that you're in. And if you're like too scared and paralyzed with fear, like, that's also bad, because you can't be paralyzed with fear. You have to move. Like, you can't just stand still there forever. And so I think, like, somewhere in the middle, it's healthy to have a certain amount of fear, just to have, like, that respect and awareness of the environment and the hazards of that environment, but also, like, you know, you have to control that fear, and so I think it's good to have some, but, you know, somewhere in the middle there. So these are the boots that I wore on Everest, and also these are the boots that I wore recently when I was climbing Vinson Massif in Antarctica. They're 8,000 meter boots. They're the warmest boots you can get. These are Millet's. And then this is what it looks like when the crampons are attached to the bottom of the boot. And the points give you the traction for glacier travel. This is the harness. And then the rig, my setup. So, you know, my ascender, this is my ascender. And then, you know, this is my belay device that I used. And yeah, so this was a setup that I used both on Everest and several other climbs. Here's the ice axe that I used on Everest, and I've used this ice axe on most of the other peaks, but I have different ice axes that I'll use that are for more technical peaks.
Okay. All right. So. Okay. And the gloves? What about the gloves that you wear?
So these are the mittens that I wore on Everest, and also a bunch of other peaks. I wore these big mittens, and then I put little hand warmers in there, and that kind of traps your body heat and prevents you from losing your fingers. So I'm lucky I still have all of my fingers and all of my toes, so I feel very fortunate.
But do they still get cold, though?
Oh, yeah. They still get cold. Yes, that's true.
And is it recommended that you always wear a helmet? I see that you have a helmet.
Yeah, it's a good idea. It's a good idea. Because anytime you're climbing, there's always a possibility that a rock could fall and hit you, or ice can fall and hit you, and, you know, you need to protect your head. Oh, I always have goals. I mean, there always needs to be something to look forward to, and I mean, I'm a climber, so, like, this is what I do, and I do have goals, and, you know, I might take a little bit, maybe the rest of the summer to kind of stop and catch my breath a little bit, but certainly I hope to be back in the mountains again. I'll either quit climbing when I can no longer physically do it, or something happens and it's not fun anymore. And you know, if I can still physically do it and I'm still having fun, I'm going to keep going. I would tell anybody, like, whatever your dream is, like, go chase your dream. It could be mountain climbing. It could be something completely different. Like, sometimes, there's a lot of risk involved, and there's a lot of unknowns involved, and people are gonna say, "Oh my God, you're crazy," But follow your heart and chase your dreams, and sometimes it's insanely difficult, but you still have to, like, if that's where your passion is, go do what your passion is.